1 Corinthians chapter 12. Before I get on to that, I read a very interesting little article last night. I thought I'd share with you. We're told in 2 Corinthians 3:18 that we'll be changed into His image. That word change is Greek, is metamorphosis, which means a total change. That's what happens in a little chrysalis when the worm is changed into a butterfly. But I read something very, very interesting that they've discovered about that change. Now, that butterfly has two sets of cells, or rather that worm does. When it starts out live, one set takes over, and all it knows how to do is eat. It's the most voracious eaters of all known animals. It just eats and eats and eats and eats and eats. That's all. And then a strange thing happens. Just like a little alarm goes off. You've eaten enough. And there's another set of cells that have been there all the time, just dormant, not doing anything. And they suddenly wake up. And they start eating. And they eat the cells that were there first. Till little by little it's all consumed. And as it consumed, they go. And they develop. And they're not worm cells, they're butterflies. And then comes a butterfly. And when it's all consumed, the right times come, lo, it opens up and there's no worm at all. I thought, well, how interesting, isn't it? There's another little set of cells, and they get waked up, and then they go to work. And they begin to consume all that was there before. Till little by little, it gets all changed over. And it's not what it once was at all. And these new cells, when they become the butterfly, they're not eaters at all. That's not their main purpose in life at all. And I think it's interesting God used that word when He says that we'll be changed by His Spirit into His image. As He plants that seed of life in us, and another set of cells begin to wake up. Another nature, another spirit begins to take over. First, it's not very much. But there's one thing they've got going for them. The powerful forces of everlasting life. And those powerful forces just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And they're very strong indeed. More than one time a seed has dropped into a crack in a rock and ended up splitting the rock. In fact, we were looking at such a thing out in the woods yesterday, where a tree grew up, split the rocks and made room for itself. And so shall it be, that seed of life that God has planted with us. Doesn't appear what we shall be, but hang on. Don't go cutting the chrysalis open. Look what's inside. You won't see anything. Did you ever do that? I have. As a boy, I'd find one. Curious to see that half butterfly. I never did find a half butterfly. All I found was a gooey mess. Don't go looking too close yet. They're not quite there. Nevertheless, just hang in there and see what God will do. See what He brings forth. Well, we're looking tonight in 1 Corinthians 12. And you probably won't remember it. But we're at verse 6 now. I will not lay any charge upon your fragile memories. I couldn't remember myself either. Much has transpired since the last time, hasn't it? And there are diversities of operation, but it is the same God which worketh all in all. Now this is in a sense repeated 3 times, giving it emphasis. That there are diversities. Diversity of gift, diversity of administration, and diversity of operations, or the way of working. That the same gift can work different ways in different people. There's many ways. We like to put God into formulas. We like the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s. We like to push buttons. Every time you push the button, the same thing happens. So we know what to do. And how frustrated when you put in your quarter and you press the button and nothing happens. Feel like kicking the machine, don't you? We like things nice and orderly. And we like to be able to know just what to do and how to hold your mouth. How to screw up your inner feelings and make them feel just right for the right thing. And there is no such thing. That's what's baffling. That's what turns a lot of people away from the ways of the God, the ways of walking in the Spirit, or moving in the Spirit, or operating in the Spirit. Because they say, well, what's the formula? Give us the steps. I had a man come to my door, a pastor come to my door one time with a tape recorder. He said, now, I want you to tell me, I'm going to put it on tape now, I want you to tell me, what are the steps to become a man of God? I had a lot of things I could have answered him, I didn't. But needless to say, at least up to this point of time, he hasn't become one. For your information, his name was Robles. It just doesn't work that way. We would like it to work that way, but it just doesn't work that way. There's diversities. And the same gift, if you'll notice, there are many gifts, and there's ministries, but now the way they work are different also. People work one way in one and another way in another. If you look through the ministries in the Testament, go back to the Old Testament, see the prophets, see how they operated, and they didn't. They didn't even use the same formulas. Some would say the burden of the Lord is upon me. Others say, yea, thus saith the Lord. And people get all mixed up. And if you don't use the prophetic formulas, yea, yea, thus saith the Lord my people, yea, I say unto you, it is I, it is not me, it is I, the Lord, speaking unto you. I heard that one once. And then there's no prophecy in the church. I've had people sitting here, half a dozen prophecies, not recognize one of them because there was no yea, yea, thus saith the Lord to it. It was absolutely frustrating to them. I had a man come visit our church, and there was a very time prophecy was flowing at a high level. He was there for a month. And finally he said, I'm leaving. I said, well, what's your problem? He said, well, I just can't be in a church where there's no prophecy. I thought, well, I'm glad you're leaving. There's diversities. There's different ways. We like to set everything down in a formula. And then when you get it in a formula, you can all do it. Because you know what to do, don't you? A, you jump to your feet. B, you raise your right hand. C, you open your mouth and the Lord will fill it. D, if the Lord doesn't fill it, it's all right, you know what to do. Yea, yea, thus saith the Lord. There's a man in Hawaii, he got that far. And then he got distracted. He went silent. With his hands still up and his eyes still closed, standing on his feet. After a long, protracted silence, he finally said, Yea, what doth the Lord say? And nobody ever found out. We like to put things in formulas. We like to find the ways of doing things. I was talking to a pastor in New York, and he invited A. Allen out to have a fine healing campaign, and he watched him very closely. And then he put it on. He had a healing campaign. And I visited him and I said, well, Claire, when did you start this? Well, he says, after Alan was here. I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, I watched the way he did it. I said, well, I can do that too. So there's somebody over in this section, right towards the back. If someone has a headache, well, you'll never miss with that one. Someone here in the center has back trouble. Well, you'll always know that's find one with that. So 3 will jump at once. That's me. He was going right to town. He learned it. I'm not sure how much healing was done. Who knows? If placebos can work as well as medicines, maybe some got healed too. We like to get things down so we can get it, get the formula and get the way to do it and get it all in order. But God just doesn't do it that way. He says there's diversities. It's different. I believe God will be delighted to use many members of the body, especially when it comes to the giftings. I don't believe God desires to have it limited just 1 or 2 or 4 or 5. And I think one of the things that holds us back, either from giving or receiving, is because it isn't like so-and-so does it. And so it isn't because it isn't like so-and-so does it, it must not be right. As again I say, either to receive or to give. Both ways it works. But God would have us have a deeper understanding. The Holy Spirit would work through the gifts. We'll be going into the gifts a little bit later. The Holy Spirit would delight to work through the gifts. But it doesn't all have to be the same way. The Word of God can come to us in such strange ways. In fact, it can come to us so strange that if we don't look out, we won't even recognize it. We'll be like the prophet that didn't recognize when his ass started prophesying, telling the prophet off. All he did was take the stick and beat him because he wasn't doing it the right way. God moves in many ways, and He wants us to understand. He wants us to know that it's varied. God does not like to go and always do the same thing over again. Perhaps that's one reason we tire quickly of things when they're repeated. We really do like variety, don't we? And when things are all, if they're too much the same, it really gets at us. We slipped up to Ann Ruby Falls yesterday. It's lovely to hear the sound of water as it cascades down through the rocks and rushes there. It's a most satisfying sound to human ears, isn't it? Even the individual drops that you can hear once in a while, even they sound nice. They put their little voice with all the other voices. The big voices and the little voices. But let your kitchen faucet drip into a pan, and about 10 minutes go by, and you're ready to do something about it, aren't you? The first one didn't sound so bad. The second 100 was beginning a bit heard. By the time the third 100 was there, you were worried. Furrows were crossing your brow. By the time it got to 500, you'd get that thing off. We don't like the same thing over and over and over. That's why when God is moving, if you're trying even to have a Spirit-led service, don't ever expect repeats, because it just won't be. Now, I'd like to can some services we've had, put them on tape, videotape, records, anything, and just push a button and let it all come over again. Oh, it was glorious. But I have the feeling about the 500th time, I'd be ready to crack the whole thing up. Because that's not the way we live, and that's not the way that God moves upon us. We would like, as I say, we like to form, we like to, it was so good when we just did that. You just sang that song, and oh, I hope they sing it again today. And sure enough, they do. And oh, you're so full of expectation and it's dry as a bone. And that turns you off for the next 4 songs. You know nothing's going to happen today. They sang your favorite song and nothing happened. And then the last song they sing is some little ditty, and suddenly it just hits your heart, bang, like an arrow. Turns you really on. But that won't work next time either. You have no idea how some of these boys that lead the singing sweat. Bless them, they try hard. If you don't believe it, just let me know and I'll give you a turn. Silence. Because there aren't any formulas. Because there's diversities of operations. And there's diversities of the way that ministries will flow and the way they'll do things. One of the things these fine young men would like to do is just copy the way that I do it. I presume they've tried and it doesn't work. Because it's going to work different for them. And we should not expect, we should never compare ministries. We should never expect them to be the same, because God has set diversity. Do you know that no church has the same flow and the same purpose in God? Each place is different. God's developing something a little different. Even if they're all going the same way, they're still different. So much so that in Argentina, when we, especially with young people that it doesn't break up their life to do it with, but we have a young person that was just not doing well under this particular ministry. And we would send them to another place where we knew they'd do much better, because that ministry would fit what their needs are. And sure enough, that's what would happen. That would be just the thing they needed. And we had quite a bit of changing around people from here to there, because they could actually do better under another ministry. They were different people and there was different ministries. We're all flowing the same way. Get together to have a conference, you have a fine time. Glorious. But there's diversities. And there's diversities of purposes for those ministries. They're doing something different. And every church is different. It just isn't the same. And the purposes aren't the same. Here we're practically many times the same people and the same ministries. We go up there to North Atlanta and it's still different, isn't it? It just is not the same. God works in different ways. And because that's so, that keeps us flexible. It keeps us on our toes. But it keeps us flexible. We never get set in a rut. If we're really following Him, He always keeps us fresh. There's that renewing. There's that regenerating. He might use the same song with the same blessing, but not that He used last time, but maybe 3 months before. And He may renew it again. That doesn't mean once you sing it, you throw it out. It means that there's diversities, and God just works in different ways, different operations, and oftentimes even with the same person. I remember one person. He's a dear old man of God. Gone to be with the Lord now several years, but he was a precious fellow. But he was just so slight of build, a little Englishman he was. So thin and so slight of build that you'd think a wind would take him away. And he was very gentle and very kind. Just soft-spoken and soft-hearted. He always ministered from the Psalms. That was his forte. The Psalms. But when the spirit of prophecy moved on him, get out of his way, you get trampled. He was changed into another man. We used to watch him with amazement. And the mouse would become a lion and roar. Everything about him would change. I remember the first time I saw that, I thought, wow, I misjudged him for sure. And then after the spirit of prophecy lifted off him, he was just a nice little sweet mouse again, that's all. No lion was there. The Spirit of God does not move like we think He'll move. I found people that were very, very loud-mouthed and extroverted. And they received the baptism of the Holy Spirit and just flow in tongue speaking. Just as loud as little voice as you could ever imagine. And they'd sit there filled with glory. Praise you, Jesus. Well, I'm not sure they're getting it. And then the reverse. Absolutely the reverse. Some timid little soul would suddenly give a shout, reverberate through the building, and on they would go. They were turned on. So God turns on some and turns off others. But there's diversities. And that's not the way we like it. We don't like flexibility. We like stability. We always know we're there, we're comfortable, we're defended. God can't reach us because we've got our little walls built all around us. And it's always that way. Sing the same well-known songs you've sung with so much that God can't speak to you through them because you already know what it's going to be. So you just turn off and sing it automatic. Say the same prayers by the same deacon. Everything just goes like clockwork. Joe Marcioli, you remember the brother that was here, was a general in the army in Korea. And he was telling me that one of the things they taught them in officer training school was flexibility. He said, we had to be ready to get plans that took us 3 weeks to make. He had to scrap them and come up with new ones in 24 hours. And they would put them through that over and over. So we had to learn flexibility. But I had a pastor visit us in Argentina. And that's the one thing that made him angry. But you could never know what was going to happen next. He liked to lay down his plans for the whole day, and bless your heart, you don't deviate. If you've made your plans, you keep them. But he found in Argentina, you don't keep them, even if you do make them. There's a lot of things can happen. And Murphy's Law says if it can happen, it will happen. And so God works with us in many ways and speaks to us in many ways. And God would use different ways and would use us at different times, even sometimes when you're not even conscious. I'm sure you've been blessed by someone that just said a word, and they weren't conscious really speaking to you at all, but it was a word of the Lord for you, and you knew it. God was speaking, and they weren't even conscious, and they certainly didn't say, stop all of a sudden, blink their eyes sort of spiritual-like, raise their arms right in the middle of their conversation, say, just a minute, it's coming. Yea, thus saith the Lord. No, they didn't do that at all. They were just talking a conversation. And it slipped right out. And it reached your heart. And you knew God was speaking to you. You see, God was working in a different way. In a different manner. But it was His Spirit speaking. And God would use us, and it would help a great deal. First of all, if you don't think you've got to get locked into a form to be used, And second, that you don't lock somebody else in the form. If you don't get in that form, then it's not valid. It's not real. It's interesting. As I've traveled different places, it's interesting the different forms I've seen. And everybody in that church always fits that form. They always do it that way. Where God can really break up the forms. I remember years ago in a church in Siletz, Oregon. There's a man, when he prophesied, he'd always just jump like a shot to his feet, speaking as he got up, and his hand outstretched like that. And this night he did. It was a powerful word of the Lord. He jumped up and put his hand on the red-hot stovepipe. And never blinked an eye, went right on prophesying, nothing happened. But I tell you, people listened to that word of the Lord that night, you can believe it. It got across. We had a man up in New York. He used to minister in what we called demonstrative prophecy. And he would demonstrate as he prophesied. I remember one time he was speaking to the fact that we ought to not just test and try out the river of God, but to dive into it. And he proceeded to dive off the top of the piano onto the floor, literally. God has many ways of doing things. I've mentioned to you before how one Methodist pastor, as we were driving down towards Philadelphia, told me how he was saved and filled with the Spirit all at once. He was a Methodist pastor and went to Aimee Semple McPherson's tabernacle out in Los Angeles. And it has 3 balconies all around a big circular, beautiful building, seats 5,000. And it was filled, and he was seated right at an aisle seat. And they got to dancing. And this dear woman tripped and fell right beside him. Her head hit the pavement, splat. My God, she's killed herself. No, she just got right up and went on dancing. She got down and went repenting. Headed up filled with the Spirit. Says, I know that's God. So he works in various ways. You might have preached to that Methodist man and convinced him by all the arguments. He's still never either been saved or filled with the Spirit. God uses so many ways because we are so different. And he has to reach us in so many different ways. And what will reach one won't reach another. Even services aren't designed for everybody. Some services may be just for one person. Really, the whole service is really to reach one person. Maybe another time 5 or 6. Maybe another time the whole church. God works with purposes, and he's doing his work. And it's the same God, but he's not doing the same thing in the same way. And so the Spirit of God would have us become flexible. And the more you stereotype it, the more you lock it into form, the more you're going to move God out. When we went to England this time, we saw a very sad thing. They had so locked themselves into a form that the Spirit of God was gone. He was really gone. The first chords of the piano, the first chorus, is they stand their feet, they take their chairs, they stack them, they put them around the wall. They get in the front and they dance. And then they sing a slow song, and they all go down the floor. And sleep. And it went so dead that poor Mike didn't know what to do or how they got there. He was really, really disturbed. Suddenly, as they say in England, the penny dropped. Suddenly he realized this whole thing is empty. What have I done? Where did we get here? How did we get there? And when I arrived, they were just about tearing their hair out. And so I said, let's try another way. So we started the first service. I said, I'll take over. And I started, and I just sat down. I didn't get up. Just took the microphone, sat there, and sang softly. Left them in their chairs. And just started singing softly, that's all. No dancing song, no nothing for them. And they were demoralized. It so busted their form up that God could reach them again. And the first thing you know, they were beginning to be melted, and the first thing you know, they're on their faces before the Lord, but not sleeping. And then they begin to say, it's been a year I haven't felt the presence of God. But everybody else seemed to, so I figured it was just me. Because everybody else was doing their, right thing. Forms can be very deceiving. They can lock you up tight. But the presence of God is free, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And the more it becomes a structured form, the worse it will be. God wants us to have that freedom. That complete freedom. It was a nice service we had the other Wednesday night, wasn't it, when Robert was traveling. We had the sermon first, prayer time second, singing last. Came out nice, didn't it? Surprised you, didn't it? And God must work through different ways and different forms because we demand it. We get so sated, we get so locked into a form. So it's the same Spirit, just because He's moving a different way, or using a different personality, or using that personality in a different way, that doesn't mean it's not the same Spirit. And we need to be alive to the Spirit and not say, well, He's doing it a different way, so it can't be God. You know how many people have missed God because of that? How many people have missed God because it just changed the formula a little bit? I know people become violently angry just because they changed the way of holding a communion service a little bit. Not very much either. Violently angry. But I found that people do things so different. In fact, I was a little bit shocked, I must say. It was a little bit far out for me when I discovered over in England that many churches don't use grape juice or wine for their communion service. They use Kool-Aid. But surprising enough, the Lord didn't seem to mind too much. They had some good services anyway. And so we keep that flexibility. We keep our eyes, our hearts open. Is it you, God? Is your antenna up? Can you see it's Him when it's doing something different and coming a different way or a different order? Breaking up the form, is it still you? That's all we need to worry about, isn't it? Are you there? Am I reaching you, God? Is that sensitivity for you? And if He's not there, I don't care what form you have, it still isn't any good, is it? His presence, coming into His presence, coming before Him, opening our hearts to Him, crying out our need of Him, bringing forth our praise and our thanksgiving. And that way we will keep the freshness, because there are diversities of operation, but the same Spirit of God is God. The same Lord, the same Christ. Father, tonight, We thank you that you keep a fresh touch upon us. We thank you, God, you don't let us grow stale. You don't want us even to get into a form and a format, a well-protocoled service. But you want us to be like children that can be so free to express and to bless your name and to praise you. To praise you, Lord, in all ways. To worship you in all ways. That your word can come forth to us in any way, but we have hearing ears. Lord, you can speak to us in any way that you choose. But give us ears to hear, please. Give us eyes to see. Cause us to know. Open my eyes, open my ears, open my understanding, that I might hear when you speak, however you speak, through whom you may speak. Father, in Jesus' name.